Hello, trumpet players. In this video, we're going to talk about, in an answer to somebody's question, how to work on your accuracy for these etudes. So, accuracy is actually a very complicated issue because there's things that you might be doing wrong on a general basis that are causing you to crack notes. Now, or not center notes or whatever. Normally, when we say accuracy, that's what we're talking about: cracked notes, uncentered notes. Okay, and that's my assumption at this point. So there are things, and we can't talk about those things right now. Okay, if you, for example, if you tongue in a certain way that causes you to crack notes, that's something that is going to take a long period to work on. That's not something that's going to be solved with what I'm talking about today. Also, embouchure issues and there's there's a whole bunch of things that can cause accuracy problems that are general in nature. We're not going to address that right now, because it would be exhaustive. It would be like, it would take up all of our time, and none of it we would know for sure applies to you anyway. That's why you take private lessons, okay? Is to get those general issues straightened out, all right? So, now assuming everything in a general sense is going well, the way you work on accuracy in a piece of music. Now, what are accuracy issues? Basically, there are exceptions, but most of the time, when we have accuracy issues, they're caused by the inability to hear the notes correctly. It's not as much a mechanical thing as it is a musical thing. You're not hearing the notes correctly. And when I say correctly, most people can kind of sort of get in their mind where the notes are. In trumpet, we have to be precise, or you will crack. Okay? If you're a quarter tone, if what you're hearing in your head is a quarter tone off, and I'm not saying, okay, so that sounds like what you're hearing is a quarter tone off. That's not really how it works. It's like, the way I see it is, as you mature as a musician, the range where you put the note gets, pitch-wise, becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. When you first start playing the horn, where C is in this big, huge bullseye like that. Anywhere you get in there, you got a C, right? As you develop more skill, that bullseye gets smaller and smaller. Now the pitch that qualifies as a C is now a more narrow frequency band, okay? So that's what's going on here. Is, sure, you might hear in your head the right notes, but you're hearing them only vaguely, like this bullseye to that bullseye, okay? And that's the problem, because that's not, the horn doesn't operate like that. So when you hit too high or too low on the note, it's going to not be centered, and it's either going to have a weird sound or you're going to totally crack the note. All right, so how do we fix that? How do we train our ears? Now, that also brings up some other general issues, by the way. Ear training as a ongoing exercise. You know, and once again, we can't actually talk about that in this context, but that's something that's going to help for future competitions and performances, right? So you want to do stuff that's going to help. And I'm going to plug my book again. My tonalization studies, that's one of the reasons why we do the tonalization studies, is because they help train your ear. Now the tonalization studies, and I haven't made a video yet, I've been promising it. Yes, I'm sorry. There's just so many things I have to do, and it's on the list, but it's not done yet. The tonalization studies help you with your ear, but also a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Finger technique, sight reading, all kinds of stuff. I won't even try to list it here. So yes, your ear training will get better if you practice the tonalization studies. Okay? Um, and what are the tonalization studies? Just a different way of playing scales. But like I said, we'll talk about that in the tonalization study video. So now let's talk about what do you do with a piece of music? So assuming that all that stuff is okay, at least okay, right? Now we're going to work on a piece of music. How do you get your ear to hear the right notes? You want to slow things down, first of all. I'm looking at the second etude. This is Texas TMEA Trumpet Etudes, right? I'm looking at the second etude, the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth line. Okay. How do you train your ear to be able to hear that? Now, one of the first things you can do is slur it. Okay, you can slur it like that. And if you're having trouble with the intervals, don't worry about rips. All a rip is when your lips aren't moving fast enough. We're not concerned with that right now because you're not going to be slurring it anyway, right? We're concerned with getting to the right pitch, getting the pitch trained in your ear so you hear it right. So if you're having trouble with those intervals, see here, I did that on purpose. It didn't quite sound natural, but hear how I'm like hitting like a gliss between the notes, okay? We prefer that to not supporting it right. Because that's what people do when they're afraid they're gonna like have a gliss, they stop the support so that the gliss doesn't come out. We want the opposite of that. Push through the gliss. That way, eventually, you get your lips moving fast enough and the gliss isn't there anymore. Okay? But what we're talking about now is try to train your ear for hitting those notes. Okay? So that's the first thing I would recommend. Step number 1, slur it slow. Then isolate the ones you're still having problem with. Let's say, for example, you might be having problems with the F to the F. And I only picked this because it's probably the most angular couple of measures in the etude. Accuracy-wise, this is like one of the most likely places for you to have accuracy problems. Other places in the etude as well, but this is one of the most likely places. So now we want to let me show you this. This is a buzz aid. A friend of mine makes these. You can buy them on my website. What I like about this design, you can quickly go back and forth between the two, right? So let's say you're working on the second beat of that measure. Actually, it's the third and fourth beat. Then you switch quickly. And then back to the horn. Back and forth like that. And then back again. If the mouthpiece comes out. see what this does is you're training your... Okay, so by the way, the way I see ear training as a trumpet player, ear training is really sort of like total body training. Because for us, ear training involves all of the mechanics to get that note exactly in the right pitch. So to me, when I say ear training, I'm talking about the ability to hear the note, play the note, hear the note correctly, but then play what it is that you just heard. Okay? And so when I'm talking about ear training, I'm also talking about the mechanics. Now, we don't want to be thinking about the mechanics. That's not what I'm saying. We're trying to create, really what we're trying to do is create a subconscious mental connection between the way the note sounds and the way the body feels to create that note. Imagine how beautiful that would be, right? Think about that. Consider that. You hear the note in your head and it creates inside of you a response that goes straight to everything physical that you need to play that note exactly right is triggered by just the sound of the note in your head. How awesome is that? Now all you have to do is worry about hearing the right note, right? So, and this thing with the mouthpiece helps you work towards that, in that direction, okay? We want to be able to have all of the muscles in our body, all of the form, everything physical, the tongue, everything, be psychologically, mentally connected to the sound of the note that we hear in our head. Okay? And that's what we're working towards. So let me show you that again. Back and forth between the two. So obviously, if you're struggling with accuracy, it's going to be more like what I just did, right? Where I just missed that top note, right? Obviously, we're going back and forth so that the accuracy gets better. You see that? Okay, now, I could already play it, so that kind of doesn't... The fact that I could already play it kind of doesn't prove anything, right? I'm not trying to prove anything to you. I'm just demonstrating the technique that you can use. Now, if you don't have one of these, you can just do it with the mouthpiece. You see what I'm doing? Now, after you get to where you can slur it slow, then you can go back. And now, so if you've been sticking around and reading my stuff and watching my videos long enough, you probably know by now that I use and teach working backwards as a way of practicing. But there's also a variation of that called working outward. So I'm going to tell you the next thing about how to be more accurate. Whatever note it is that you're having trouble with in the accuracy, you can work outward from that interval. Let's say the interval you're having trouble with is the arpeggio coming down, right? Let's say you're fine with the rest of the measure, but that arpeggio coming down, you crack the notes, right? And you've just done this process that I showed you here with the slurring and slur first, do the mouthpiece thing back and forth, and now you're going to the tonguing part. So now we're tonguing, we're going to work outward from that arpeggio. So here's what we would do. And then sing and finger it. By the way, I'm a firm believer in singing and fingering. So this is what it would look like if I was practicing this. If I'm having accuracy issues with that exact section, this is what it looks like if I'm practicing that. Dut, 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 dut. Now the next step is to add the note after. Okay? Da da da. Da da da. I'm going to do that 10 times. Play it, sing and finger it. Play it, sing and finger it. Now we're going to add a note before. See, we're working outward, not backward. Outward from the note that you were cracking. Okay? And we're still not at tempo. In fact, you shouldn't be playing at tempo yet. I don't want my students to practice the music at tempo until about a couple, maybe 3 weeks before the audition. We'll talk about that in another video. If enough of you say, why do you do that? If you ask me beneath, let's say, a limit of 5 people, at least 5 people say, why do you practice only slow until right before the audition? If you want to know, ask below, or otherwise I'll put it off for another day, okay? So, now we're adding a note before. Da da bum dum. Da da dum dee. We're going to do that 10 times. Now we add a note after. Da dum dum dee dum. See what I'm doing? Working outward from the cracked note. And what that does is that in your subconscious, you're kind of focusing, putting emphasis on that note so that it stands out, not mechanically. Get your head out of the mechanics, okay? Get your head out of what the lips are doing. Get your head out of what the tongue is doing. Get all of that out of your head. That's for when you're doing your routine. That's when you think about that. When you're practicing the music, stop thinking about that. Okay? When you're thinking about the music, you're hearing it. You're hearing, first of all, you're hearing music, not notes. Okay? Even at this, having it cut out like that, you're hearing a piece of the music. These aren't just note, 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 note. That's not how you should be thinking. You should be thinking, this is part of that phrase. Da-da-dum, dee-dum. Right? It's part of that phrase. You should be musical at all times. One of the biggest mistakes people make in preparing an audition or any kind of performance is they wait until they know the notes and rhythms to add the music. Well, that's never going to work. It hasn't ever worked. It's never going to work. Not if you want to play at your best. Now, that's, some people might say, well, Mr. Lewis, I did it. You probably didn't play at your best. I'm sorry. You could have played better than you did. Okay? Anyway, another tangent. All right. So, let me see here. So, we're working. So, I showed you working outward now. That's another way to fix cracked notes. Working outward. So, I've given you several very important things to do for your cracked notes, your accuracy problems. Now, another thing you can do, and this is not just so I get more views. You want to live with the recording. And by the way, not just my recording. There's other recordings popping up. Listen to all of them. Listen to all of them and listen to them over and over and over again. Okay? Because that will also help you stop cracking notes. I should have mentioned that in the beginning, actually. Listening to the music more is going to help you because you're going to hear it. Remember, that's usually the source of a cracked note. Now, that's assuming, I've already said this is the caveat. Okay? That's assuming that there's nothing wrong going on with the way you play physically. Okay? And I have to make that assumption because you're not my student. I don't know anything about you. Okay? So we're talking about accuracy issues only in the context of someone who's playing basically correct. Doesn't have any tonguing issues, doesn't have any embouchure issues, breathing issues. Okay, as long as all of that stuff is working naturally and correctly, this stuff I'm doing with you here is going to help. Okay. All right, so that's what I have for you. If you have any questions, please ask below. Now, I mentioned about only practicing slow for now. If you want a video about that, please ask below. I'm not going to do it unless 5 people ask for it. At least 5 people. All right? All right, so that's how you become more accurate on these etudes. Thanks for the suggestion, and we'll see you on the next video. God bless you.